Couch
potatoes.
Hello and welcome to the Couch Potatoes podcast, presenting your hosts, Nova.
You girls watch out for those weirdos.
We are the weirdos, mister.
Hey guys, we've got a little bit of a sad announcement to make before we start this episode. Commodore has left. He's gone off to greener pastures. He's found a job. So I'm going to give him a bit of an applause and a huge thank you for helping me out on my podcasts and content creation thus far. He's been a huge help throughout things like It's Time to Dual Roast and several of my other early efforts, and I just want to give him a big applause and a big thank you. So thank you so much, mate. I'm really going to miss you as a content creator partner and co-host. Fair winds, Commodore, and take care. Bye. Hello, fellow witches, wizards, and enthusiasts of the occult. Today we're going to be doing a very special podcast about the craft. We're going to take you on a time machine back to 1996, and we're going to be talking about this great movie. And also we're going to be talking about goth subculture. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. So, let's do a breakdown of the plot. The plot is about three girls who find solace in witchcraft and try and deal with the pressures of school through forming a coven. Now, they are looking for a fourth. This girl arrives from LA with her parents, and they've just moved into this very strange house. And one of the interesting things I've found about the movie as we go into the beginning portion of the film, I want to make note of it, is that there is a snake at the beginning of the film. I don't know if you noticed, she's driving into their property and she sees a snake. And that is when you really start to notice that this film is about to kick off and things are about to go a bit strange, or to use a Buffy the Vampire Slayer term, a bit wiggy. They end up moving in, and this homeless guy comes in with the snake going, "Do you want the snake?" Now clearly the father, he has no idea about safety and he doesn't bother to lock the door, and this homeless man just walks in. I mean, come on. But I'm digressing here. She's really scared, and she ends up, she ends up getting really bothered by it. The next day she arrives at school, and then she meets this jock character. He's very into her. She's obviously his second target, or his next love interest, and he tries to gain her trust. And she sees her looking at three girls on their own. He says, "Oh, those are the bitches of Eastwick. You stay away from them. They're bad people. Don't go near them." And inevitably, being a school peer, as we all know, you want to listen to the advice of your peers. So you inevitably try and stay away from those people. But one day in science class, one of the girls notices that she's fiddling around with a pencil, but not in the normal way you would expect. She's trying to use telekinesis to control the pencil, and she might have learned this from a TV show, she might have learned this from a pamphlet that she read that she was curious about, she might have learned it from a magician, whatever. And the girl's looking at her thinking, hey, this girl might actually have some talent, and we've found a fourth. So the three girls end up trying to buddy up to her, and she becomes one of the fourth of the group, the witches. And in the end, tragedy ensues and they end up messing with powers that they don't understand by invoking the spirit and causing all sorts of crazy stuff to happen. And that's when their powers become really potent and their consequences become really evident and they start really affecting lives. So we're gonna be talking about the craft's cultural impact. I think the craft's cultural impact for a lot of teens has been through the fashion, particularly in the resurgence of goth and grunge culture in 2026. I feel like there has been a lot of resurgence into that whole goth 90s culture, but given a fresh flavour, a fresh coat of paint, if you will, in comparison to the goth culture of the 90s back then. They've kind of mixed it in with emo fashions and goth fashions, so it really kind of meshes together until you don't really know which fashion is which. So it is quite different to how goth was perceived like back in the 90s or back in the 80s, you know, or even in the 70s as well. It's kind of a mixture of all three, really.
On that note, can you give an overview of goth culture and how this movie affected it?
So goth culture in brief, and I'm going to be as brief as I can be. It started as a movement in the 70s to combat conservatism. And what people did was they dressed up in these outfits, they put black makeup on, they went to clubs, bars, things like that. Things that popped up out of the blue to sort of fight against the conservative culture of the time. And that's how goth culture kind of bloomed. And then you had the music, influential artists such as Susie and the Banshees, Bauhaus. Big names like this really defined the culture and the music and what it really was, which was a movement born out of this music. That's what it was originally to these people in the 70s, and then throughout the 80s and the 90s it changed a little bit and became the goth culture, what we know as, which is the sort of grungy goth culture you see in the 90s, and also that was, I think, peak goth in my opinion. 90s goth was kind of peak goth. Today's goth is a little bit confused. You've got a bit of punk, you've got a bit of grunge. It's kind of all over the place fashion-wise. I wouldn't necessarily call it true goth fashion, especially not without the iconic rosary beads. I find a lot of goths today don't really wear the rosary beads as much, unless they pay attention to fashion history on YouTube, of course. But if you look at a lot of pictures, they don't have those classic kind of gothic telltale signs, which explains goth fashion.
How do you think that the craft changed goth culture or influenced it?
I think it certainly influenced it. I think what it brought in was sort of the witchcraft element into goth culture. So the idea of, you know, goths using witchcraft work as an outlet. Although I have no doubt that there were some goths in earlier times who practiced witchcraft, I do think it was popularized by the craft, and it sort of became popularized because of the media attention that the film brought. So the subculture had many different influences through it. The first one I'd like to point out is the literary influence, with Oscar Edgar Allan Poe's poetry and Oscar Wilde's poetry. I've I've read some of Edgar Allan Poe's stuff, and it is a little bit depressing. A lot of it. That's what he's famous for, and that was a big influence in goth culture. Another set of literary that I want to mention is Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is one of my personal favorites. It includes themes of people going insane and dismal plots. For example, Jonathan Harker is stuck in a very drafty castle as a prisoner, and he is trying to find his way out. And during that time, he does go a little bit insane, but in the end, he escapes to go back to his wife. I hope I'm not spoiling it for anyone who haven't read the classic, but anyway. Other horror references were more tongue-in-cheek in the 70s. That is to say, it was more to shock people rather than anything else. But as time went on, I think the horror genre and the fashion became more intertwined, more meshed, and as a result, films such as Edward Scissorhands, The Night Before Christmas, Batman 1989, all of these films, even The Matrix, which I think, from my perspective, is quite unrelated, does have gothic tones in it, believe it or not. Especially with all of them dressed up in leather and that sort of early 2000s vinyl action vibe, which people seem to love, especially Charity. All of the goth guys loved Charity, and my brother was also into Charity as well, but he wasn't a goth. But it just goes to show, how far the fashion extends and how different it was going forward, both comparing it to the 70s and modern culture today. Other fashion influences could be categorized with Marilyn Manson with his heavy makeup and Susie's suit. That is from Susie and the Banshees. Their band was very influential in bringing about the goth scene and the movement during the 70s. So one of the things that I really liked, just digressing a bit with the other stuff we're talking about, is the Blair Witch Project. Now, although this particular horror is not inadvertently gothic in the slightest, the sequel in question does have a gothic representative in the film. Now, there's an interesting scene where the friends are going on their way to Burkittsville to go and go to the area where the Blair Witch is supposed to be. And the guy's like, "Oh, where's your weird friend? Oh yeah, we've been corresponding with email." And they go to the meeting place where they're supposed to meet her, which is in fact a graveyard. And there's this really cool opening scene where she's like, "Kim, hey Kim, where are you?" And this hand sort of appears past a gravestone and just sort of gives a thumbs up. And then they come around and see Kim lying on the gravestone like she's having a good old sunbake against skin that's not actually supposed to be tan, drinking beer like she doesn't care, just this badass girl that really doesn't care about anything in the world and is just sort of loitering on a gravestone, is probably the best and most iconic scene that I've seen in sort of modern millennial goth fashion for a long time. Another millennial goth that I want to make mention of in goth culture that's really risen through the ranks in comedy at the moment is Mr. Noel Fielding. Now, this guy being my own personal favourite, comedian. He normally does comedy of the absurd, but he identifies himself as goth, and he is as iconic as you like, but is also incredibly goofy. But he does always, I think, not make fun of his subculture, but he has fun with his subculture, I should say, and tries to, make people make light of it and make people feel comfortable around his own subculture and his identity. Now he's doing the Great British Bake Off as well, so they have a goth co-host doing the Great British Bake Off, helping, present the program. And he does a great job with it, and I think he represents his community well. So he is one gothic comedian that I think certainly needs to be made mention of in this podcast, and certainly one of my personal favorites. So another film that I want to mention that is a representative of goth culture that I forgot to mention is a film called The Crow. I've never seen it, but I know that the male goth in the film, he wears very heavy makeup, and it almost looks like, something out of Kiss. And I think he has special powers or something like that. Like I said, I've never seen it, but I'm probably going to be doing a review on it at some point. And just, that also was apparently a really influential film for its time. In summary, with the goth culture, I think what we need to remember here is, through all of the points that I've raised, the main strong theme that tends to come through really strongly is belonging. And I think that's what these films and pop culture and TV shows are trying to represent, is people who need to feel a sense of belonging. So I think that, in essence, is truly what the goth culture is, and that's how people have responded to it.
On a similar note, how did you feel that the craft affected young people?
I think it affected them greatly. I think it called into question a lot of people's identities, and that's what you really get from these four girls. Is they're all lost. They're all searching for identity. They're all searching for meaning, and magic gives them that meaning, that sense of community, that kinship in their coven, if you will, which gave them a sense of belonging in appearing in a school where they didn't exactly fit in.
Where are the actors from the craft now, and how did it affect their careers?
So I think where the actors from the craft are now.
Can you tell us a little bit about Fairuza Balk, her career, and her character Nancy Downs?
Well, I think we'll start with Fairuza Balk, because I think that is a very good place to start. She's had somewhat a small career in acting, appearing in Family Guy and various other voice acting things. And also she has had a rather small music career, appearing in certain EPs with some people, doing some soft rock. So I don't think personally she's had much of a high profile career through acting or in the limelight. Maybe she just wanted to have a bit of a personal life outside of that, or looked at the other actors and thought, I don't want to be like that. So she's had a bit of a quiet life. In regards to her character, Nancy Downs, I thought she played a fantastic role as Nancy, and will forever be the girl with the freaky smile. Her role, in my opinion, played the troubled teenager to a T, and she was able to sort of reflect that moody goth culture, which really set the tone for the 90s, I think, and really sort of helped goths in 1996 come into their own and find a sense of belonging.
Can you tell us a bit about Robin Tunney as Sarah Bailey and her character?
So Robin Tunney had actually a bit more of a successful career. She also starred in the series Prison Break and had quite a good career in several TV shows. She did a fantastic role as the heroine, Robin Tunney, going up against Furiosa Volk in the movie, and I think she played the role as the teenager who wasn't buying into the whole witchcraft thing personally, but she ended up using it to defend herself against Nancy Downs, which I thought was really cool and really showed the sort of heroine coming into her own and fighting against an evil, which I thought was really showed her strength as an actress, but it also showed her strength in the role as well, and delivering the message that heroines don't cower in front of adversity.
And what about probably the most successful actor out of the main group, Neve Campbell, who played Bonnie Harper?
I feel like Bonnie Harper was probably the biggest face on screen here. She also starred as Audrey Prescott, the wife of the Lincoln lawyer, which I think was probably maybe one of her biggest roles, I think, and has certainly kick-started her into other projects.
What happened to the TV concept of The Craft?
That was shafted because of something called Charmed, which was a TV show in the 2000s, which personally I love. I loved Charmed as a TV show. I thought it was great. But it wasn't so great for the director, who believed that he was ripped off, which I'm also believing that was the case. But I also think that it was at a time in Hollywood where if you didn't come up with the idea first, you wouldn't get the bragging rights, the intellectual property for that idea. So I don't know what happened, whether he wasn't quick enough to submit that idea to the legal authorities to get his intellectual property down in writing, or what, but whether that was the case, and Charmed was just a lot quicker off the mark with that idea, and they had the money and the investment to be able to go ahead with the first episode. I don't know, but whatever the case was, I can tell you now that whatever the case was, I can tell you for a fact that Charmed was definitely the one who was heavily influenced, shall we say, by The Craft, and was able to make quite a good TV series from that.
Can you also tell us about The Craft sequel and your thoughts on that?
So the Craft sequel, well, I don't really have very nice things to say about it, but I will say that it was a good attempt on a more modern take, but my problems with it were that it was too 2020. In my opinion, the Craft should have been left in 1996, or had more connection to the 1996 version. I feel like if you do things like that, you honour the other source material by making lots of reference to it. They could have done a similar thing, which would have probably done a lot better if they were going to do an entire remake. And this is something that I've said previously, that if they're going to do an entire remake on this thing, they should just have, instead of 3 girls, have 3 guys, all of different backgrounds, and, just do a completely different thing. instead of, like, if you're gonna do an honorary thing to the previous source material, you bring that cast back. You try and, give a bit more oomph to the plot. I just felt that there wasn't enough oomph and enough, kind of zeal for this film, and I can't really call it a horror. Honestly, it was more of an action movie. And the girls who were coming into their powers, it had more of an action movie vibe than it did a horror vibe, which is what The Craft was about.
Talking about the horror genre, how do you think The Craft affects the horrors that have been produced more recently, and how do you think its influence can be seen?
I think its influence can be seen in any kind of witchy sort of film with the Ouija board. I mean, there was that stuff in the past with The Exorcist, the girl the girl messing around with the Ouija board and all that, and there were definitely flecks of different horror films throughout. I think, The Craft's simple message, if we really want to peel it back, is be careful what you wish for. Because, if you mess around with forces and they give you power, that's always going to come at a price.
Do you think that that's a message that has been kind of repeated throughout cinema and used later in later horrors as well?
Yeah, I would agree that it's been a message that's been repeated throughout cinema and has been used in later horrors. So many films, action movies, horrors in particular, have used this message to drive home to people, hey, maybe this isn't all it's cracked up to be.
What are your kind of final thoughts on the movie, and how do you rate it compared to other similar movies?
I give it a 10 out of 10. Honestly, if we're talking about the 1996 version, I don't see anything similar to it. It's a film that stands on its own, and I think a lot of fans would agree with me that it stands on its own. It has the it has all of the kind of goth 90s kind of aesthetic to it. The fashion is a big point because you do see a lot of scenes of them walking around in slow motion, and I think this would have captured a lot of female fans because immediately they would have wanted to dress like the characters, they would have wanted to feel like Furiosa Bulk, they would have wanted to feel like some of the other characters, they would have wanted to feel like Trudy, they would have wanted to feel like all of these girls who were part of the film had caused a stir, and these women went out there and they just wanted to be them. They wanted to be the cool four witches walking down their own, I guess, high school, and they wanted to reenact that sort of feeling. And I think that's what the film's impact had amongst the female, certainly amongst the females. Amongst the guys, I would have imagined that they would have been scared witless of Nancy Downs and not even considered dating a goth girl, and that's why in the 2000s, particularly, goth girls had a bad vibe because there are these scenes with Drake and Josh. I don't know if you've seen Drake and Josh from Nickelodeon. It's about these two boys in high school, and Drake's sitting there eating his lunch. And always in this scene, these two goth girls come and sit beside him. And they've got a thing for him. And they're both really creepy about it and, trying to pressure him into going out with them, and he's like, no, I don't want to go out with you, no, and they're just pressuring him and bullying him into doing it. So from that perspective, I think goth girls, for a lot of guys, except for the strange like me, goth girls weren't exactly everyone's cup of tea, and I think that's what those shows tried to showcase. The goth girls were scary, and that was actually an influence from the craft. So I think we've got to thank Furiosa Bock for acting really well, so well in fact that it scared the male populace for many decades from dating gothic women. But that being said, in jest, I think that the craft's true impact is belonging and being able to, be part of a group and being somebody. And that's, I think, for both men and women, that's a message that can resonate.
Do you have any final thoughts you want to add before we finish up today?
No final thoughts, except that I think that, wherever these actors and actresses are now, they've got something really fond to look back on. And the impact that they've made to teenagers throughout the decades, not just for me, but for my brother's generation when the film came out, and even earlier. For people who were in 1996 who were part of that wave, I think it was a really influential film about belonging and trying to fit in, even if the thing that they were trying to fit in with was a bit odd. There is a strong message of belonging in that film, and I think that's something that we need to remember. So that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to keep gaming on Kooy style. And thank you so much. I'll see you later. Bye. Couch
Potatoes.
We hope you've enjoyed this Kooy Games podcast. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, please don't forget to follow us on Spotify and on our SoundCloud. Thank you for listening.